one race, competing visions for the future of New York City. A Democratic socialist, a guardian angel, a three-time governor, and the incumbent. Welcome to Battleground New York City, the fight for your vote. I'm Ester Fuchs. You were at candidate events today. Tell me what you heard and what you saw.
Mayors have three jobs. You got to keep crime low, quality of life high, and the tax base grow.
And there are going to be strange twists and turns before the votes are counted and the dust settles.
I think that much we can count on. Let's get right to it. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, where we're covering the all-important New York City mayoral election for the next 80 days. Why? Because it's really, really important, and it's not just a local race anymore. All eyes are on this election. Democrats around the country want to know what lessons they can take from it before the midterms. Republicans are watching to see whether they'll get a useful foil. The president is watching to see if he can weigh in. And not to mention, it's going to shape the future of one of the most important cities in the world. So yeah, it's a big deal. We've got it all covered here. I'm Ester Fuchs. Let's get right to it. Later in today's show, a former City Hall insider breaks down the race for New York City mayor and what Democrats might be able to learn from Zohran Mamdani's campaign. But first, as always, let's get right to the latest news from the campaign trail. Joining me once again is Craig McCarthy, City Hall bureau chief for the New York Post. Craig, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you about some of your own reporting, of course, but I'd also like to get you to weigh in on some other reporting because you're on the ground covering this race. Wired magazine today has a story about Zohran Mamdani's appeal to Silicon Valley that I found really interesting. The headline reads, Silicon Valley is panicking about Zohran Mamdani. New York City's tech scene is not. New York City tech leaders aren't rattled by the prospect of a Mayor Mamdani. In fact, many of them are welcoming it. So talk to us about that divide. How is Mamdani winning over New York City tech leaders? And is that an important constituency, either financially or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know at this point how influential the tech lobby is in New York City. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that there's a massive difference between Silicon Valley as being a much more conservative than out here in New York, as they're going to lean a little bit more liberal. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense. And I think also like how he ran his primary campaign, it was so social media driven. I think that that's where a lot of this embrace comes from as well.
The social media aspect is maybe captivating the New York tech scene because, you know, it's New York City and these are both voters and potential movers and shakers in a Mamdani administration. I understand that. But this divide is really interesting because you're hearing business leaders, taking the tech out of it, business leaders in New York City, also a little freaked out about Mamdani. Is that for personal interest? Is that because of what he might do to the financial sector, or are there other things at play?
Well, I think this is like multifaceted, right? We were just coming out of COVID when Adams came in. I mean, he's going to get credit in the future years for really building back up the city, for working with businesses, working with downtown,
Adams
working
will.
with Broadway. Adams, yes, Adams.
Uh-huh.
What I'm saying is that I think a lot of business leaders are scared about any sort of faltering of that at this point, because it still is a very delicate balance. We're still not up to everybody's still back in the office full time. We still have a lot of remote work. They're converting a lot of these buildings. And I think the biggest thing has obviously been talked about left, right, and center on this is his proposal to raise the corporate tax. So corporate business tax. So I think like that coupled with everything coming out of the pandemic, I think people are very worried how fragile the actual ecosystem is in New York City at this point.
And any change coming along. Okay, that's great context. I'm glad I asked. A new poll by Gotham AARP has Mamdani at 41.8%, Andrew Cuomo 23.4%, Curtis Lee was 16.5%, Eric Adams at 8.8%. You've been reading the polls, you've been covering this. Have they moved in any meaningful way since the primary?
So I think the top line numbers we can look at is that I think the honeymoon is a little bit over for Mamdani. He's kind of hovering in this high 30s to low 40s number. I think somebody like Andrew Cuomo, though, who maybe kind of stuttered off the gate into the general, we've noticed there hasn't been really any movement. He's been sitting in those mid 20 ranges. And with Eric Adams, not failing to even get into double digits doesn't look good for somebody who's being told that he should be dropping out in the next few weeks. I'm told like internal polls has him a little bit higher in the teens. Same thing with Curtis, but the internals that I've seen have been briefed on. I'm told that's Andrew Cuomo's in the mid 20s and Mamdani's in the high 30s, low 40s. So it seems like every one of these polls that keeps coming out just keeps reinforcing what everybody thinks.
They agree. Okay, another juicy bit of news from Politico. Cuomo is reportedly counting on Trump and top Republicans to tell the party faithful to vote for him if they want to stop Mamdani. Now, publicly, as you know, Craig, Cuomo has insisted he's not looking for Trump's help and hasn't even spoken to him recently. But at this Trump-friendly Hamptons fundraiser, he seems to say he wants Trump's help behind the scenes. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this is the same kind of line that Eric Adams has tried to walk that really not sure if this coalition exists, right? Of people in New York City who are really for Trump, but in the mainstay in the Democratic politics or anything like that. So it almost seems like Cuomo is kind of taking a page from what Eric Adams did, in February and March, where he was trying to create this coalition kind of uniting Republicans and Democrats and independents alike. It seems to me that it's, he's just trying to carve off GOP votes from Curtis Sliwa. I mean, most of those votes are splitting between Curtis and Eric at this point. And I think he's doing anything he can to, move the needle, right? Like he's been hovering in the mid 20s. Yeah. He has been campaigning for the last few weeks. He has been out there. He's been attacking people. He's been actually doing events. We can argue whether or not they've been successful sitting at a table and pontificating and lecturing reporters. But I don't know if this is, I think he's doing anything he can to really move the needle. And you have to think of the people that are in those rooms are people who play both sides. There's a lot of people there that they're donating to Republicans and Democrats alike, and they're not really party loyalists. He's just speaking to the people that are a little bit more wealthy and then they are influencing in these politics in this race.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it also just, to me, a layperson, sounds like Cuomo wants Trump's involvement without saying he wants Trump's involvement. He just doesn't want to be attached to it, right? Because
but I think that comes with so much baggage, right? I mean, like Eric Adams, last year when they were mulling working with Trump to get rid of his criminal indictment. This is what I would talk about with people at that time with Democratic operatives. It's like any sense of you working with him is political death kill for Democratic politics in New York City.
Right. Okay, you reported in the New York Post yesterday that Eric Adams is suing the campaign finance board for arbitrarily, capriciously, and unconstitutionally, quote, denying his reelection campaign nearly $5 million in matching taxpayer funds. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so last December, amid the whole federal indictment to Eric Adams, which involved a lot of his campaign from 2021, it was donations, and that kind of spanned into his current campaign. So the campaign finance board, which oversees all this taxpayer-funded money and the matching program of 8-to-1, they make the final call whether or not these funds can be doled out into people's war chests. So he's been denied these funds for months. He's looking to get back into this. He's already lost one case in this, and he's filing another lawsuit. It's seemingly the same as the last one, so I'm a little bit confused here how this is going to play out much different, because the justification that the board keeps giving is that they haven't responded to records requests for all of these fundraisers that are in question, and they keep responding, well, they're under seal from the criminal case, and the CFB says that's not a valid answer. So we seem to be going around in a circle with this.
So it's a stalemate. I see.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But listen, it's maybe a great way for Eric Adams to keep in the news. Who knows? Finally, before I let you go, both Mayor Adams and Cuomo are slamming Mamdani for his stance on prostitution and sex work. New York Post, where you work, reported that Adams said, I don't know where in his Quran it states that it's okay for a woman to be on the streets selling their body. While Cuomo has previously called out Mamdani for trying to decriminalize sex work, though he sponsored legislation to do the same. Just tell me, what are the contours here? What are the different positions quickly before I let you go? And we'll dive deeper into this issue in another episode.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Mamdani's looking to decriminalize this. The argument has always been that sex workers are being exploited. They arrest them, but they don't arrest the Johns. That's been the argument on the liberal side of things. Now,
Right.
Cuomo's coming at this as a very pro law enforcement, saying we have to do this because it's going to be, it's going to be the 80s in Times Square again. And Adams is kind of leading into that and kind of hitting the religious side of these things.
It's a really interesting issue that I would not have predicted would have come up in this race, a race full of important issues. So it will deserve a deeper dive, and we'll do that at some point. In the meantime, Craig, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, up next, what the National Democratic Party can learn from Zohran Mamdani's campaign strategy in New York City. Battleground New York City, the fight for your vote. We'll be right back. We're back at Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, where we're laser focused on the New York City mayoral race. And joining me now for the bigger picture is Ester Fuchs, professor of public policy and political science at Columbia University. She's also co-chair of Columbia's anti-Semitism task force. Ester, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So before we get to it, I just want to say you were a consultant at HUD when Andrew Cuomo was HUD secretary in the Clinton administration. You didn't work with him closely, but I'm just wondering what you thought when he decided to run for mayor and then decided to switch to the independent party to stay in the race after losing in the primary.
So I was really surprised that he decided to run. And when you step down from being governor for whatever reason, and in this case, of course,
Yes,
people know it was for accusations of sexual harassment from female members of his staff, no one expects a former governor to run for mayor of New York City. It's
right. A former governor who was meant to run for president, right?
That's exactly right. And on the independent line, that really isn't a surprise. You know, he decided to qualify for the independent line because in a multi-candidate primary, you can, even with runoff primary, things can be close. And having that independent line in your back pocket means that you can run in the general election. So it was politically smart.
Yes. And I'm going to ask you what you think Andrew Cuomo's strengths and weaknesses are. And then I want your take similarly on Mamdani. But start with Cuomo.
So Cuomo, I mean, he is experienced and he's a really good manager. And I would say, you know, he hires smart and effective staff, which is critically important in a city like New York. We have 300,000 people working in the city. We have a $110 billion budget. We have an economy that's larger than almost all third world countries. People don't understand that. They don't realize that how important the city is and how much money is at stake and how many people work. So you need somebody, I believe, who has that kind of managerial experience. And he also does have a record of accomplishments, and people are aware of what he did to rebuild LaGuardia Airport as an example. I mean, how hard it's been to get any capital projects off. One thing people don't understand, which I'll bring to your audience, is that Cuomo agreed to fund universal pre-K in the city from the state budget. So Bill de Blasio gets credit for universal pre-K, but in fact, I don't understand why Andrew Cuomo hasn't stood up and taken the credit because it would never have happened without his agreement to fund it from state revenues. So, you know, there's many examples.
What about weaknesses? Those are real practical strengths.
Right.
Are his weaknesses political mainly?
His weaknesses are twofold. One is political for sure. You know, when people step down for the reasons he did, nobody wants to see them back. I mean, it's pretty, you know, basic. I mean, a bunch of rich people in New York wanted to see him back. And so he was able to raise a lot of money. But somehow that, you know, the issue of one person, one vote seems to have been lost on that crowd. You don't win campaigns with money. You know, even Elon Musk could not buy elections. You need to put together that coalition. So having a lot of rich supporters, you know, it's very nice to have money to run your campaign, but it doesn't, you can't buy votes. So this is, people did not want to see Andrew Cuomo return. Having said that, because of the nature of this race, There was significant support for him, which he managed to lose as the campaign progressed. And so it's kind of amazing to me that in the end, frankly, that he lost by the amount of votes that he actually lost by. But that's something else we can talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about Mamdani, because he lost because of Mamdani, and talk about what you think Mamdani's strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, I mean, so, I moderated a Democratic primary panel discussion way in the beginning before Cuomo announced. And that was the first time I met Mamdani. And it was the first time I understood that he was actually going to be a viable candidate in the mayor's race. I mean, this was a race with, at least eight real candidates who people, knew many of them. And he wasn't one of those people that that anybody assumed could have a chance to run. He is charismatic. He is young, which is actually very important in this context. And he really understands social media, and he had his finger on the pulse of New Yorkers, and not just the New York voters who have been traditionally turning out, but he turned out more voters. He had a mobilization strategy. He got young people excited. And he had his finger on the issues that people cared about, not on the policies problem, but he had his finger on the issues. This was a campaign about affordability, first and foremost. That's what people care about in New York. Somebody created a political party a couple of years ago. The rent is too damn high. So this is not a new issue in New York. I mean, this is, everybody knows people who want their kids to live here. Their kids are telling them, I can't afford it. So he understood that, and he understood how to mobilize and excite a new group of voters. He used social media to mobilize young voters and Asian voters. And Cuomo ran a 20th century campaign. I mean, they were putting up TV ads targeting people during prime time, older people who were already his supporters if they were going to turn out. That's not a winning strategy. He went after, Cuomo went after, the Black middle class and the Jewish voters as the sort of white ethnic, and this is an old school coalition. Meanwhile, New York City doesn't look like that anymore. And I mean, that is part of what really mystified me. We're like 31% white, 29% Hispanic, 23% Black, and 15% Asian. Mamdani mobilized young people across all races and Asian voters for the first time. And he got them very excited.
There's a lot more I want to cover with you, so please stay right there. We'll be right back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, after this. Back here on Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, one more time with Ester Fuchs. She is professor of public policy and political science at Columbia University. And your insight here is so great, Esther. I want to ask you more broadly about the Democratic Party, which is struggling to see a way forward in a second Trump era, and in an era in which voters are rejecting the Democratic brand. Is Mamdani a way through that? Is he a way out of that?
So this is a complicated question. I think you really have to look at Mamdani's campaign first, because this was really a brilliant campaign. I mean, as I said, he energized voters. He focused on young people, and he addressed issues that people really care about. It's not that his policies are implementable, which is a different problem, but he addressed the issues that people care about. Candidates matter. He is charismatic. Hey, I mean, it sounds a little bit like Donald Trump, doesn't it, in some ways?
Yes, we've heard that.
This was a campaign where a person reached in deeply. When they looked at the map of New York, they didn't see a winning strategy for them with the people who voted last time. They energized new voters. They created a coalition from people who normally sit out elections. The Democratic Party has to do that. They have to bring in young people. They cannot run old, tired candidates anymore. It's, if there's any lessons learned from Mamdani, and they've got to use social media more effectively. I mean, these are so many basic things that they need to understand. There's very few people in the Democratic Party who understand how to do a ground game. So this is a ground game. There are other aspects, though, of this campaign I don't believe are useful for the Democratic Party in a national sense.
Tell me.
Okay, well, Mamdani, was supported by the Democratic Socialists of America and by the Working Families Party. I don't believe that the policy agenda of the DSA is the policy agenda that a Democratic candidate in national elections can win with. And I don't even believe it's a compelling or effective policy agenda, to be perfectly blunt. So that's not the part that they need to pay attention to and emulate. Having said that, part of the reason Mamdani was able to win is because the DSA has a ground game and they can mobilize. The traditional organizations that have mobilized for parties don't exist anymore. The Republican Party is not an old school machine. The Democratic Party doesn't have an old school machine. They candidates are the people who turn out voters. Parties don't do much of that anymore. And how do they do that? Part of it is creating the coalitions that excite voters and working with the organizations that can turn out voters. And this is, Mamdani did this very effectively with the DSA and with the Working Families Party. And frankly, the unions which endorsed Andrew Cuomo didn't turn out voters for him. So even the unions, which ostensibly turn out voters, I think they do more of that in national campaigns, to be honest. They did not turn out in the primary for Andrew Cuomo. And, you look at the Black churches, the Hasidim in New York, this is particular to New York, but you have the evangelical Christians, you have your religious groups who can turn out voters. You need a ground game with an organizational infrastructure. You need social media. You need excitement in your campaign. You need an exciting candidate. And, the Democrats have failed on all those counts. What can I say? And you need a story. You need a story. Mamdani's a storyteller. His mother is, somebody who makes movies. He was a rapper. He is a storyteller. He did this amazing video with a halal truck guy called Halalflation. You should all look at it because it's brilliant.
You make such a good point about the parties because the Democratic Party was not going to be interested in providing infrastructure to a Zohran Mamdani campaign. Either he knew that or didn't care. And he used the DSA, not that he wasn't aligned with them anyway, but he used the DSA for that infrastructure and all the things a party should be doing. Is there a lesson there for the Democratic Party?
Oh, yeah.
That candidates might not need you as much anymore, especially if you ignore them.
Yes, there's a lesson, but it's even deeper than what you're suggesting.
Tell me.
They would need the Democratic Party if, in fact, they actually had an infrastructure that could turn out and mobilize voters. Mamdani tore a page out of AOC's playbook and Trump's playbook, but AOC is the local example. She ran, people may remember, against a guy named Joe Crowley, who was the second person in the Democratic Party at the time. He never lived in his district. My doorman told me he's not winning. He was the only person I knew who said AOC was winning because he's part of 32BJ, which is the union that turns out votes. And he knew that this guy was not a viable candidate. And the Democratic Party in New York, in Queens, couldn't turn out a vote for him. There was like a 10% turnout in that primary and she won. So he did the same thing, Mamdani.
I hope the parties are listening, because the way I think most voters think of the parties and their usefulness or lack thereof, I think these younger candidates are really flipping this on their heads. I have to go, but really quickly, what advice would you give real quick to the Democratic Party as they head toward the midterms?
I think they have to really get this ground game together. They've got to have young, viable candidates who can energize voters in each congressional district. This is going to be a grassroots campaign that is most effective, and give the money to the candidates that can create effective grassroots campaigns.
You heard it here from Ester Fuchs, professor of all things. Like, you got to pay attention. Democrats, the candidates, and the professors are telling you what to do. Esther, thanks so much. And you'll have to come back before this election's over.
Okay, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote tomorrow and until the election's over. Thanks for joining.